Washington Township, my name is Catherine Carey. I'm the Director of Assessment, Data Technology, Registration, and School Community Outreach. This is a 24/20 update, and I'm here with Mr. Joe Bollendorf, or our superintendent. And the reason that we wanted to have this update is because we're starting to get a lot of emails and a lot of questions about a lot of our recent decisions, some including our staffing issues and what issues are we having with staffing. Also, we're showing that we're not transmitting COVID in the building. A lot of our positive COVID cases are coming from the community and we're not transmitting in the schools. So questions are arising about, if we're not transmitting in the schools, how is this affecting things like staffing and our ability to stay open? So Mr. Bollendorf, our staff and community want to know, what are the decisions that led us to pivot to full remote? Because as of last week, we were ready to open in the hybrid instructional model.
Thank you, Kathy. Let me start with an apology to our community, because I know getting the email Sunday afternoon that we were going to pivot to the remote, obviously came as a surprise to folks, particularly since I sent an email on Friday indicating that all signs were good that we were going to be able to open on Monday. And the truth of the matter is that that's where we were on Friday. Things change very rapidly in this environment. We'll be able to show folks some data a little later in this to give them a better sense of where things are here in Gloucester County and in Washington Township. But the decisions to pivot to remote on Sunday were as a result of my contacting every single principal in our district and manager who, particularly in the area of transportation, because they're responsible for getting our kids to school and home, what their status was to see if there had been any change since our conversations on Friday that indicated that things were good. And, unfortunately, it just deteriorated. In just that short amount of time, the 2 hours that I spent on the phone with all of these folks, it became unfortunately very apparent that my ability to staff many of my buildings was in serious jeopardy. And I think it's important for folks to understand why that's happening. It's not just happening because COVID is ramping up and more people are getting sick. That part is true. But because of the current state that we're in and where our region is rated in the orange region, the rules of quarantine and close contact tracing have also changed dramatically. And that has significantly increased the number of students and staff that are not permitted to come to school because they have to quarantine because they've been deemed close contacts. That singularly, in addition to the increased cases, we're seeing more cases now than we have ever have. Last week in Washington Township alone, there were over 230 cases reported. On Sunday, in the 24-hour period from Saturday to Sunday, there were an additional 41 cases reported in our community, not in our schools, in our community. But many of those folks were people who work in the district, whether they be teachers, whether they be assistants, whether they be bus drivers, custodians, other staff members. But those most important to our ability to open our doors and to supervise our children are clearly our teachers, our assistants, and our bus drivers who are responsible for getting kids to and from school. And that's where we were hit the hardest, in those particular areas. 2 weeks ago, the Southwest region, first of all, let me back up. Several months ago, the Department of Health of New Jersey divided the state into 6 regions. And each region is rated on a scale called a Cali score based on the numbers of cases, few data points that indicate where they are. Here's the COVID activity level report that we get every Thursday. This is an example, and I've shared this with the community. So those of you that have been reading my letters may have opened this attachment and seen this, but perhaps it wasn't clear what that meant. So you see right now the entire state of New Jersey is colored orange. Not long ago, we were yellow. If you could scroll down a little bit, Kath. There's a timeline since the COVID restrictions began, and you can see where the state was at varying times during this. There was only a 5-week period that appears that the state was considered red. And then they went back to orange, and then we went through the early spring and summer months and the beginning of this school year where the state was in green, but then things began to ratchet up. And now for the past 3 weeks, we've cycled back up to the orange phase. Even back during these times, there was really never a time that the Southwest region got out of the moderate phase. This is really a new phenomena for our part of the state. You can scroll back down. And I don't want to lose people with all this information. I really don't. But I just want to illustrate some points. The main point is that when we were designated orange in the state, in our region, Southwest, which is Salem County, Gloucester County, and Camden County, the rules of the game in terms of contact tracing and quarantining changed significantly. Prior to that, and I'll give the analogy, if you had a coworker and you worked in close proximity with one another, then technically the two of you, if one of the two of you got sick, the other one would be considered a close contact and they would have to quarantine. But prior to us being the orange, that other person wouldn't have to quarantine until a positive test result was yielded for the person who wasn't feeling well. So the person would not feel well. They would not report to work. They would go get tested. They would get their test result. And if that test result was positive, then the other person who was deemed a close contact would have to quarantine. So in a family, if one family member gets it, the rest of the household is basically a close contact. But until that house member tested positive, nobody else in that household had to quarantine. Now that we've went orange, as soon as anybody presents symptoms and is considered symptomatic, they are then presumed positive. And every single person that is considered a close contact, that's anybody that is within 6 feet of you for more than 15 cumulative minutes in a 24-hour period, is considered a close contact. Now they have to immediately start to quarantine pending a test result for the person who is symptomatic. And with the increased number of cases that we're seeing, there's been quite a demand on testing. So testing, which used to take maybe 3 days to come back, is now taking 4, 5, 6, in some cases, a week to come back. So people who are close contacts of someone who has to get tested are now having the quarantine until those test results come back. And even if they're negative, they still have to quarantine until the test results return. It's keeping them out of their ability to report to work wherever they may work. But it's particularly crippling our school district and our ability to have enough staff on hand to be able to be in our buildings. Our substitutes are daily sub-reports, meaning we've created cohorts of people who only report to certain buildings. And we have an ample number of those folks who report specifically to those schools so that we're not, sending people from one school to another, which we felt was really important and a good practice to provide in this particular environment. But even with those daily reports, we can't fill the needs of the numbers of people that are calling out. Transportation was particularly hit hard, and it was in serious doubt on Sunday as to whether or not we would be able to transport all of our children. So all of this information, comes at you fast and furious, changes, very, very quickly, and it necessitated, what was a very difficult decision. I know that everybody in this town doesn't know me, and you're a superintendent, you sit behind a chair and you're making these big decisions that have, far-reaching effects on our families. But I live in this community and I care deeply about our schools being open. I know how important that is for a variety of reasons. Most importantly, for our kids that need that daily contact, that need that education, that live instruction. We want our schools to be open. Any decision that forces us to, pivot to a full remote is made with the utmost care, and unfortunately made at the last minute in this case because the hope is to keep the schools open. And so to provide, a situation where you're not from day to day, hour to hour, week to week, making decisions that alter the things that people have to do in their own family life to take care of their children, keeping our schools open doesn't lend itself to my ability to do that. The decisions are going to be constantly fluid. They're going to be school to school. They're going to be hour to hour. They're going to be day to day, because we're presented with new information that we have to react to and we have to make decisions on. And it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. So I want to debunk the myth or the thought that we're doing this mainly because we're having a spread in our schools. That's not the case. In fact, the reality of it is that infection rate in the school have been dramatically great. We've had very few cases that we could put our finger on and say that transmission happened as a result of contact in the buildings. It's fairly non-existent. And so I believe that. I believe that our schools are a very safe place for our kids to be. We are practicing social distancing. People are wearing their mask. Kids are in cohorts. We're doing all the things that we need to do to be able to have our schools open and provide, safe instruction. But there are things that are out of our control. And if our staff is getting sick, if our staff is being told they have to quarantine and they cannot report to work, then it becomes nearly impossible for us to open our schools. So why didn't I just close the schools that needed to be closed? Or why didn't I only close for a week? Well, that's where the data really comes into it. So the Cali score that you saw, if you can bring that back up again, Kathy.
Sure.
That came every Thursday. We get this report from the state, and it dates back to the following week. So this report, which came out on Thursday, dated back to November 28th, which was the day after Thanksgiving. And we did see a decrease in the case rate at 42.93. It was over 47 the week before. It was nearly a 5-point drop, which I found to be really, encouraging news. But there is a website, and if you can bring up that website, that really calculates things on a daily basis. And this is more specific to our county. So as you saw in that last report, the Southwest region was at 42% in terms of their case per 100,000. The reality of it is that Gloucester County, their infection rate is 63.8%. I'm sorry, their daily new case rate is 63.8%. If you can scroll down, you'll see that that's the third highest daily new case rate in the state, only behind Passaic County and Camden County. And our positivity test rate has increased as well, higher than that last report. So things are not trending in a positive direction. Based on this, there's only one county that isn't in, this danger area, and that is Cape May County in the entire state. Passaic County is even in a higher, rate in terms of what their status is. But the point is that infections are continuing. The things that we're hearing on the news and the media appear to be happening around us, and we're going to see, more people getting infected, more people getting sick, more people having to quarantine. So at the end of the day, I felt that the only way I could provide some consistency to our families and to our instructional model and keep those teachers who are quarantining, but certainly capable of teaching, and even those that are positive infections, but are feeling okay and are able to teach, I want to put them in a position where they can provide instruction for our kids. Our kids then have their same teachers. And I just felt very strongly, along with all the people that I consult with, that this was the absolute right thing to do at this time. And so our hope is going to be to see a decrease after the holidays, that we'll be able to open up to hybrid instruction again after the new year on January 11th. Clearly, we'll be monitoring the situation very closely after the holidays to see where these numbers are, to see what our staffing situation is, so we can determine whether or not. And I will do my very best to let our families know as far in advance as possible. And I do apologize, but I did not anticipate that kind of spike in a 2-day period. I was shocked on Sunday, and but I had to do what I had to do. There was no way I felt that we could open our doors, on that day. So again, my sincere apologies for doing it late, but that's the situation we're going to continue to find ourselves in. If our goal is to try to keep our schools open, things are going to happen last minute, and that's really unavoidable. And the only way I can avoid that is by doing what we're doing now, which is calling for remote instruction for these 2 weeks leading up to the holiday and the week after the holiday.
Thank you, Mr. Bollendorf. That was very helpful. In addition, I just want to let the community know that we are still monitoring our COVID-19 info at WTPS.org email. So if there are questions that aren't for your building principal, please let us know and we'll be happy to answer them or put you in touch with the right person. Additionally, I think it's important to know that we released a video on the safety measures that we are taking on a daily basis. And we are still taking those measures even during the remote instructional period. So I just want to make sure the community knows that we're continuing to clean our buildings because we do have some buildings that, are still functioning. Is that correct, Mr. Bollendorf?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So thank you. So those resources are still there and, we're still here. So if your child needs to speak with a counselor, please reach out. If you have questions about instruction, ask your child's teacher. And if you need more assistance, please reach out to your building principals because we're still here and happy to help. Mr. Bollendorf, is there anything else you'd like to say?
I want to thank, there's, quite a few community members who reached out. They recognize that this is a difficult time and very challenging for all of us, that, there's so many of these decisions, can be second guessed. And no matter what decision we make, there's always going to be a segment of our population that is not happy with that outcome. I don't think there's any way around that. We're just in a situation right now where decisions have to be made and we have to, apply our barometer to do first and foremost what's best for our children. That's what we're doing. And right now, keeping the continuity of education in place is really critical. And then you add to that the health and safety of all of our people, I think is critical as well. So we'll continue to do that. I also want to thank the people who had, constructive criticism to offer me. This is a pandemic that is new to everyone and we're navigating this together. So, people's thoughts and their ideas and their comments, are taken in the context that, they want to be heard and they want to be helpful. And I'm appreciative of that. And as I stated before, I read them, I respond to them, and I appreciate it. But I most especially appreciate the sense of support and the recognition on the part of our community that, this is a challenging time and we're all just trying to do the very best that we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.